everybody. I'm Rick Dancer. Welcome to Get Real with Rick Dancer. Tonight, we're back in Oregon talking about education tonight. Depending on what study you look at or survey, Oregon's somewhere in the lower 10, like 40 or below in terms of education. And yet we spend a ton of money on education. So we're going to talk with a group, Education Freedom, and find out a little bit more about what they're doing, what they're looking at, and get you guys kind of up to date on what's happening with education in Oregon. We could not do this without Dr. Bratland. Chris Gentle, caring and trusted, Dr. Michael Bratland. He ran for the school board. He was so concerned about education a couple of years ago. He ran for the school board in Eugene, did not win, but he put his money where his mouth is and laid it out there. And that is just for some of you who don't understand how this whole system works. The school board is one of the most powerful positions you can have in the whole state of Oregon, and not enough people get involved. Yes, it's hard. It's difficult because you're usually working against or with a pretty liberal group of folks. But if we don't have people in there talking about common sense and what we want for kids in education, we're not going to get anywhere. So joining me from Education Freedom, Donna Kreitzberg. It's so good to have you in here. I'm going to put me over here because I noticed when it airs, what's so weird, Donna, life is so weird. I just started doing this way. I'm looking away from you on the other one. So it looks like I'm totally ignoring Shelly. Last night I had her on the show and it looks like I'm not paying any attention to what she's saying. So I'm hoping this is going to help fix that. Thank you for coming on and being here.
Oh, absolutely. It's great to be back.
Tell people real quick, what is Education Freedom and what is your group trying to do?
Well, we are Education Freedom for Oregon, and we are bringing school choice to Oregon. We are trying to bring policies that would allow students to choose any school environment that works for them, have the choice and the funds to do it. Basically, let the money follow the student. We ran 2 initiatives where we had to collect signatures, and that expired in July of 2024. Unfortunately, we didn't get enough signatures, so those measures died. Then we tried to run it through the legislature, our constitutional school choice measure, as a Senate referral measure, which meant instead of getting signatures, we were trying to get 50% of the legislators to vote yes. And then our measure would magically just go right to the Secretary of State and be on the ballot. But unfortunately, this past session, it was just all the oxygen got sucked out of the room by the tax increases and other policies that our little measure just didn't get any attention. So now we're back and we're going to try to spend the next year and a half educating folks, sharing information about what school choice is, how it's beneficial, why Oregon needs it. It's washing like a tsunami across the country. Many states have it, and Oregon students deserve it too. We do have the National School Tax Credit Scholarship that was part of the big, beautiful bill. But unfortunately, at the last moment where it was supposed to be all states would participate, they had to do something where it became an opt-in provision. So now blue states, where it was really necessary because you can't get it through the legislature, now the governors of those states have the ability to opt in or not. But the interesting thing about this, the national program, is it doesn't take any money from schools. Donors donate, get a tax credit, and they donate to an entity. The entity then divvies out the money to students for scholarship. And if we don't have Oregon's governor opt into this program, our Oregon citizens can still donate, but all the money they donate will be going to students in other states. And the money could be used for public school students. So it's really good for all students, and it helps public school students too. So we're going to spend some time trying to persuade the governor and legislatures that this is a great deal. It's not as good as our citizen measure, but it's still going to bring school choice here, but we just need them to opt into it. So lots of things happening, still trying to get school choice one way or the other.
What is people's biggest misconception about school choice?
Well, the thing that we hear most often is a combination of money issues. Oh, the money is only supposed to be spent at public schools, or having school choice will defund public schools. And both of those are factually incorrect. Nowhere in the Oregon Constitution does it provide that the money that is extracted from taxpayers can only be spent at public schools. The money is supposed to be spent on Oregon students, wherever you find them, public school, charter school, homeschool, private school, wherever they are. they should be entitled to that money, because the whole point of that money is to educate the kids. And the second fallacy that they have is that, oh, somehow it defunds public schools. Well, the way that we drafted ours, our initiative would actually increase per student funding for public schools, because the amount that walks out the door with the child is only about half of the money that was allocated for a child in public school.
How much money do we spend?
All boggled up.
Donna, how much money is spent per student in Oregon?
Well, it was about $18,000 per student 2 years ago, but since then we have increased taxes and spending on schools by $2 billion with a B. So now, I haven't run the numbers lately, but it's got to be over $20,000 a student. And
we're number 40, 47, 48.
40th. Yeah. On the one measure that I follow, we're 40th of all the 50 states. And yet we've pumped $2 billion in, and we, according to the testing, the national testing, we're ranking abysmal. Students are not improving. Their absenteeism is off the charts. Violence and bullying is off the charts. There's just a crisis in our public school system right now.
Where is that money going, Donna? I mean, $20,000 per student. So if the kids are coming in and their test scores just suck, where is that money going?
Well, unfortunately, what it seems to be is that a lot of the increase in funding doesn't go to the classroom. It goes to support staff, administrative salaries, pensions. It just gets sucked off to the side.
So PERS is sucking the hell out of we're paying $20,000 a student, not me, I guess, I don't live there anymore, but Oregonians are spending $20,000 a student. And what you're really doing is paying off the PERS from the PERS fiasco that's gone on in Oregon for the last 20 years.
Well, what's weird, and I don't understand how this can happen, because it wouldn't happen in a private business, but student enrollment has gone down substantially. And just in those last few years, student enrollment has decreased 10,000, but funding has gone up $2 billion. So if you had a private industry that the sales were dropping, and you think they could get away with increasing the price of their product? I don't think so. And yet we keep pumping more money in and spread over fewer students, and our test scores keep going down, and absenteeism keeps going up. So there's just something fundamentally wrong there. And of course, then sadly, the teachers are not benefiting from this increased funding. It's support staff and administrative salary, and as we discussed, PERS. So the teachers aren't getting their fair share, and the students aren't getting the education that they're entitled to. And yet it's the system that we have, and they keep just grinding the chain. And instead of thinking, gosh, let's try something new, like, oh, I don't know, school choice, where students actually can choose the environment that works for them, that has shown across the country it saves taxpayers money and improves education for all students. Let's try that here for a change.
You know, years ago, I did a special at KEZI on homeschooling, and everybody in the newsroom, plus myself, thought this was going to be a bunch of Christian parents, taking their kids out of school. Not in Eugene, Springfield. What we found, it was a lot of hippies, a lot of people who they were not of any religious affiliation. They were just people who didn't trust the system, and they wanted to educate their kids at home. So I think there's a misnomer out there with people thinking that this is a certain group of people. This is the Christian right coming in and trying to get kids out of schools and destroy our public schools. I think they've done a pretty good job of destroying the public schools on their own. I think this seems like if you want Johnny to be able to go here, it's your tax dollars. Does the Constitution, is there anything you were saying earlier, it doesn't specify that it has to go to public schools. It specifies to pay for children's education. Is that correct?
Correct. The word public school is not even in our Constitution. It's education, but education is imparted to all the students, regardless of which room they're in. They can be in a public school classroom, a private school classroom, a living room, a charter school classroom. The point is, we started out long ago with basically everybody homeschooling. And then as we got more mobile and more people concentrated in areas, we decided, hey, let's all put money in a hat and let's use that money to build a one-room schoolhouse. And then as that got crowded, we had to build a bigger building. But the point was always to have everybody get a fair shot at the education, wherever that might be. But somehow Maybe it was the rise of the teachers' unions. And
Oh, you think?
somehow it got shifted
Oh,
so that it was all
dude,
just for public schools.
you
And
know,
that's not what it's supposed to be for. It's supposed to be for the kids. It's to how can we best spend that money so that all kids get a good education. And not all of them are going to go to college, so we have to be aware some of the kids are going to go to trade school, some will go into the military, some will go into a job, some will go to college. But we can't just have a blinders on and say there's only one flavor and we control the flavor, and if you're zoned in this district, that's where you have to go and you have no say. And that's a
right.
terrible way to do schools.
Because if you're a parent who's putting your student through, say, the Pioneer Youth Corps, or whatever it is now, Willamette Academy, whatever, but you're paying a fee at a private school, and then you're double dipping, you're having to also pay for public school. It seems the fairest is everybody pays their 20,000, and you get to say, I want my student to go to Marist, or I want him to go to Springfield High School, or I want him to go to this alternative high school. And the money follows the kid. I don't get what's so difficult about that, except for there's 3 letters that stand in the way. OEA. And if you didn't know what those stand for, it's the Oregon Education Association. I know it well. They paid for my college education because my father worked for them as a negotiator for 30 years. I know all about them, but that's who runs the state. That's who runs the governor. That's who runs education. And people need to understand that, because it's time for Oregonians to take back that lead. I have some Julianne Weinert, I think her name is. Donna's right, our numbers are down. Also, there are more administration positions, a bunch of money going to people in leadership, not to schools, not to students. That is absolutely crazy. And the new teachers, their PERS has been revised so that it's back down there, but the PERS problem is huge, and you can't buy your way out of it. And I
don't know what the solution is to PERS, but I do feel that the solution to our schools is we've got to have better teachers who are given the tools and the funding. And to follow up on that viewer's comment, according to the Common Sense Institute April report, between 2013 and 2023, the number of teachers in Oregon increased by 18%, but the number of administrators grew by 32.5%, and the number of support staff expanded by 59%. So I don't know exactly what these folks do, but I know they make a boatload of money, and it's not reaching the teachers, and it's not reaching the classroom. And that's showing because our test scores are in the tank and kids don't show up for school. And it's just, and they're not learning. And we're in a crisis, and everybody's like, yeah, whatever. Okay, let's go on to something else. No, these kids can't get a mulligan. They can't get a redo of the 3rd grade or the 7th grade. We need to address this problem right now. Give these kids the tools they need for good education right now. This isn't something we can put off.
What role do you think Oregon's nanny state attitude during the pandemic, where most schools, where I live now in Montana, they were shut down for maybe a month, and Oregon kept shutting down for 2 years, a year and a half, 2 years. What impact do we think that might have on some of that, and we just keep throwing money at a problem that we caused?
Well, I think 2 things came out of that. One is the silver lining that came out of that is parents saw for the first time, because they walked by with a bunch of laundry in their hands and they heard what little Johnny was being taught, and that alarmed them, or what he wasn't being taught. And then they realized, gosh, maybe I can do this at home. And so a lot of parents became aware that there's some problems in their schools. And so that was the silver lining. The bad part, of course, is that a lot of the youngsters, and I know I'm not a teacher, I'm not a linguist or anything, but I know a lot of students will learn by watching someone's face and watching their mouth and seeing reactions and learning social skills. We took that away for kids for almost 2 years. And it's during a time period where I don't know that they can get it back. So there was a lot of stifling of educational opportunities by keeping kids out of school, not to mention just the social, hey, I don't get to play with my friends, I don't get to do some sports and whatever. So there was a lot of bad things that came out of it. And it was also unnecessary, as we're finding. Kids were the least likely to get COVID. And so locking them out of their school on some medical reason that now is shown to be not correct, has just been devastating to their educational learning, and they're not going to be able to get it back.
How frustrating do you think that is for parents when they realize how much of their tax dollars are going to this? And then you hear the governor and others getting up and saying they always use our children and education to get more money out of their budget for their budget. And yet you can't educate a student for 20 grand a year. When other states, what do you know? I should have asked you earlier, but do you know what other states, um, what it costs? Because I've heard numbers like 5 and 7,000 and 8,000 per
Well,
student.
I'm looking at a chart from thelion.com, and it's got a chart where it shows various states and how much they spend and their fourth grade math scores. And Oregon is in the pack for how much we spend, but we're at the bottom for performance. And then that's showing probably about the $17,000 number, and we're down at the 220 on a score of up through 250. So Oregon is the middle of the pack for spending, bottom of the barrel for performance. And then there's some like Texas, Mississippi, Florida that are at the top of achievement, and they're, I would guess, at least $5,000 to $7,000 spending less than we are.
So that's like places like Florida. They're at the
Florida,
top.
Texas, yeah.
They're at the top of the list.
There are a lot of reports out there now showing that just throwing money at the school system is not improving the grades. And we see that here because it doesn't make it to the classroom. It doesn't make it to the teacher. It gets siphoned off. So it's like we're throwing a bucket of water at a fire, but we're throwing it in the middle of the street instead of on the house that's on fire. It's not reaching where the flames are.
What do you have to do? I mean, you probably scratch your head too, because you've tried this and you guys have been successful with getting people interested, but not interested enough to get enough signatures, because I think there's still so much fear and propaganda about school choice out there. But why is that so hard to sell to people to say, I think it's because they think it's designed to destroy the public schools, which is 100% incorrect.
Right. Well, I think also, I'm new to this whole world. I just came in thinking, 4 years ago, we need school choice here because statistically it improves education. So I was a lawyer. I'll write some amendments to the Constitution. We'll get some signatures. We'll put it on the ballot. We'll do some advertising and it'll pass and everybody will benefit from it. I was obviously very naive, but I think there had been almost a vacuum for the last 30 years where 30 years ago, a group of people tried to do a school choice measure and they got on the ballot, but then they lost. And then there have been kind of just a lot of frustration, and it was just such hard work that nobody really did it. So there was this vacuum for 30 years where nobody was really countering the arguments that are incorrect. Nobody was putting out the correct information that said, hey, it helps increase funding for schools. It improves education for all the students. It's where the money should be going because it's helping the student. And so there wasn't really a lot of messaging going on. And so then the teachers union was able to beat their drum steadily without conflict for about 30 years. And they have access to a gazillion dollars that citizens don't have access to. And they have a big megaphone that they can communicate with all the teachers and send stuff through the school system that we don't have access to. So they were able to get a message out that protects their monopoly, because they want to have as many bodies in that public school building as possible, because most of those bodies have to pay teachers union dues. And they take those dues then and they basically fund legislators to pass laws that put more bodies in the building. The bodies in the building pay dues to the union takes the money to get more legislators. So it's this incestuous circle that's very difficult to break because we don't have the bazillion dollars. So we're just trying to run on common sense.
So it's about power.
It's about power and not changing the way things are, even though the way things are not achieving the goal of educating the kids. And I'm sadly starting to find out that the teachers union doesn't represent the teachers well, because I've had a lot of teachers complain to me, and it admittedly doesn't represent the students. So you're kind of left with it represents itself, and it has to keep having money to feed itself. And so then the children for whom we're paying all these taxes just get thrown out with the bathwater. And it's horrific.
So Pamela says, I'm wondering what percentage of students in Oregon are homeless or below the poverty line. Do you know blue states have some of the worst rates for homelessness? Without enough housing, parents and kids are in crisis. Hard to learn without a stable housing environment.
I don't know the percentage of homelessness here, but that's a very good point. And that's another reason that school choice should be available, because school choice evens the playing field. It allows any student from any background to be able to take their allotted funds and go to the school that helps them. And
That's a great point. So so really by holding back on school choice, you're really creating a system, a class system where, you know, a lot of homeless kids often end up in the lesser schools. And if you had a homeless child, it's their 20 grand. So they get to go where they want. They can go to the finest school that they can afford with 20 grand, just like little Susie, whose parents, you know, make $250,000 a month. So it would even the playing field. And I don't.
It gives access to all the children, because right now there's kids whose parents have a hard time paying their rent and their groceries, and maybe they're not even paying taxes right now, and their child deserves an education. And maybe because of where they live and the fact that where you live controls the quality of your school, because the lesser neighborhoods have the, you know, kind of unfortunately the lesser quality schools. So if that's your environment and your child is forced to stay there and you don't have an ability to crawl your way out of that because you don't have the money, then your little Johnny is stuck with the environment that is not going to serve him. And he could be a genius, she could be a genius, or they just deserve a good education regardless of their smarts. So the fact that we zone these kids into an environment based on their parents' income is a brutal reality. It's almost like redlining and saying, oh, you're of a certain skin color, you can't go over here. So
the very people who are preaching, you know, equality and all that kind of stuff are actually creating, by not going school choice, are actually creating a non-equal, very biased system. That is absolutely so hypocritical. Christopher says the teachers union represents Democrats because the Democrats funnel tax money into the teachers union and the teachers union donates to the Democrats. Christopher, when I ran for Secretary of State in 2008, I learned a really big lesson. The Oregon Education Association is one of the most powerful groups. And it was interesting as I did some research, because I found in the past, I don't know what's the currently happens, but in the past, what you'd find is the person who won governor, their chief of staff, would all of a sudden be someone who used to work for the OEA. Or you'd find the Secretary of State's staff were former OEA members or people working with the OEA. So this is bigger than anything you can imagine. And they've been getting away with it for years. And, you know, and I think what I think is really interesting, Donna, is the scores. You can't, I know they always discount it, you know, all the pro only public education people discount this test scores. Well, you can't just judge it on test scores. Well, the test scores show that states like Florida and Texas are cheap, less money is being spent, and their students are doing better on the test. You have to have something to measure it by. In Oregon, you got no excuses except for the fact that you've been wasting money and you've been not focused on educating children. You're paying off your damn PERS bill.
Well, and it's interesting too, a lot of our volunteers were teachers, and one teacher in particular showed me a chart of the grade inflation. And so there's a lot of parents out there, and little Johnny comes home with his report card and he's got all B's, and they're like, oh, that's great, Johnny's doing great. Because we remember 100 years ago when we were in school, a B was 80 to 90. So that was, you know, you're above the pack, you're doing great, that's fine. Maybe they could get to an A, maybe they couldn't, but that's okay. Well, now, guess what the range is for a B? Just guess.
What?
60 to 79. 60, that used to be an F, or at least a D.
And that's what now?
Now that's a B. So an A goes from 80 to 100. A B is 60 to 79. A C is 40 to 59, a D is 20. How do you even get a 20 on a test?
Well, that's Kate
20 to
Brown. She
30.
dumbed down the whole system. Our former lovely governor, who reduced test scores, and then they used some bullshit. Excuse my language, but I do this all the time. About it's not fair to the underprivileged and stuff. Well, what's not fair to the underprivileged is their $20,000 is being wasted on a school that can't teach them when they could be using that money to go to a real school that they could get an education out. So that kind of washes that whole argument out.
Well, and also once you remove, COVID was earth shattering. We get that. It was a cataclysmic event. And so I could maybe understand removing some standards for just a short period of time while everybody kind of got back to normal. But to take standards for graduation in our schools, and now for our current governor to extend that, I believe, to 2019 or 2029, is that, what's the expression? Bigotry of low expectations.
Yeah.
If you don't expect good things from your students and challenge them and provide them with rigorous academics and just really invigorate them to succeed, well, they're not going to show up. They're not going to try. If they can get a D with basically not even performing on a test or an assignment, the kid's kids at that point, they want to go play baseball or hang out with their friends. And so unless school is challenging and rewarding and, digs into their curiosity and their interests, these kids are going to come out just with nothing. And then what are we going to do? One of our worst case situations here is we've got homelessness and drugs and crime. Well, what do you think is going to happen when we pump a bunch of kids out the front door of the high school who don't have a good education, haven't been given skills? Do you think maybe they're going to end up with drugs and crime and homelessness?
Well, I've talked to numerous teachers back in Oregon when I was there, and they would say their whole day is spent like being mental health counselors and trying to keep kids in order, or they have so many kids. It used to have maybe one or two kids with a behavioral problem. Now they have numerous kids. And that's why I've had friends that have said, we started homeschooling our kids because we realized they were spending 8 hours with what we can do at home in 2 hours. And we don't have all the bullshit with these kids that are, and I'm not knocking, kids have issues and stuff like that, but why is so much more of that there? And why have our teachers become babysitters and mental health counselors rather than educators? And why isn't some of that $20,000 instead of paying off people's PERS being used for mental health counseling in our schools? Somebody else up here asked a question saying, why hasn't the school union been audited to check their money? Well, let's see. We could just make an assumption here. Let's go. Who does the auditing of state budgets and stuff? Oh, that's the Secretary of State's office. Who's the Secretary of State? Democrats. Who got them elected? The Oregon Education Association. Why don't they go to the Oregon Education and say, we want to audit you? Because they're the purse bearer. That's the whole thing, is they don't get audited because the governor and the Secretary of State and the state treasurer, they're all elected by money from the powerful, not just the teachers union, but in this case, we're talking about education. That's why they need all that money, is so they can control the people in the office. That's my personal opinion.
There's a lot of teachers that are in the union who believe in school choice. It's not a partisan issue anymore. It's not just Republicans or conservatives. Democrats and many teachers, because they understand the importance, because school choice brings options to them also.
Right.
Because right now they're not really valued. They don't have the union vying for them to give them good wages because they're trapped in a public school. But with school choice, there's the opportunity for new schools to be created. And that teacher could jump ship and create their own school. Or they could say, I'm a really good geometry teacher. If you want to keep me, you better actually give me a raise that I deserve. And so it gives them more clout. So it's helpful for teachers too. And they just understand that an education is something that's very unique to a child. You can't just put 30 kids in a classroom and teach them all the same way and expect them all to absorb it all the same way. Kids learn differently. You have to adapt. And these big monolithic public schools, they just can't adapt as well as a small, viable private school or a home school or a micro school or some of these other environments.
So Donna, if a bunch of people got together and started creating like these really innovative and interesting schools, then fewer of those teachers would probably be in the union, which then the union's goal is to get more people, more teachers, keep more teachers in that union. Oh, that's why they fight you. Oh, I see. It all goes back to power and money. That is just so weird, isn't it? It's
It
just
is.
it's just so interesting when you start talking it out. You start thinking, huh, why don't they get audited? Why don't they want school choice? Because they'll lose their purse. That is so interesting. And I wish, the frustrating thing is what the good and the bad. The good is, I think the pandemic and Oregonians and all of us in this country are just so done with the BS. It's like, stop lying to me, stop going behind my back. This is my money. I'm done. I want my kids to get educated. I shouldn't have to stay home from work and homeschool them. I should be able to send them to a school that I feel is good, and my money should follow my kids. I think that's so much people, but then there's this whole group of people out there that just buy into it all the time and go, fear of change. Look at Oregon when you tried to change to self-service gas. Everybody else in the whole country, except for 3 states, I think, pump their own gas. I was talking to a legislator the other day, and she says, we couldn't get that passed without giving people an option, because so many people didn't want to pump their gas because they didn't want to change. And it's like, and I see that in Oregon, you know what I mean? Where it's like, this is how we've always done it. We can't change that. Well, look at sales tax, same thing. Every time, no, we don't, we're never going to have a sales tax. Well, all those tourists coming to your area, and I don't have a sales tax in Montana either, but I kind of think we might be better than the stupid property taxes we're paying, but we're so afraid of change. So what do you do
What's
next?
interesting too is that school choice within the sentence is choice. So this is not a mandated thing. It's not you must choose a different school, or you may not leave, or whatever. If it's working for you where you're zoned, great. But if your child is not doing well there, then this school choice gives you an option to go, very many different places, find an environment that works. And it could be that a family has, let's say, 4 children, and each of them learn differently. They have different personalities, different skill sets, different interests. So you could end up with one of the children at a public school, one at a charter school, one at private school, and one stays home with their parent or goes to a micro school. So you can have the flexibility. And again, the money should follow the student, because the money is meant to get education to the student, wherever that student is. It isn't meant to fund a building that happens to have, a public school name on it. It's not to fund, just teachers or administrators. It's to be used for the kids. And if it's better spent at a smaller school or a different school, or even a public school across town, that's the option that the student should have.
So Matt says, haven't people been able to create charter schools already? Yeah, they do. And do they get funding from the state?
Public schools or charter schools in Oregon are public schools. They're created from one of 3 sources: a university, like Oregon State, a district, or the Oregon Department of Education. But they are usually privately run, and so they're one step toward freedom away from a public school. But there are also limitations on our charter schools in Oregon. If you have a virtual charter school, in some instances, the enrollment is capped at 3%. And that was
right. And the districts fight it.
They don't want the student leaving the building again, because then it might cause
that $20,000
one less teacher or one less body in the building that pays dues.
And then Matt says parents would just have to have money to pay teachers, which is a tough pill to swallow with this economy. Under the school choice, Matt, that's not true. The money you're paying for each of your kids, Matt, $20,000 a year to send them to school in Oregon. Under school choice, you would get to pick which school, and the same $20,000 that you would put at Monroe Middle School or whatever, you would go follow your student to wherever they went. So low-income families would actually benefit from this. And then he says, can't that happen right now? We've got one in private and one in public, and both are fantastic. Yeah, you could have your choice, but if you didn't like the school you were going to, you could take your money and send it with your child. So it's not shutting down any schools. It's, but I think it would, the competition in the public schools would be good for them.
Well, competition will drive, and it has driven innovation and improvement across the country where you have school choice. Because instead of having a yellow school bus pull up in front of the public school and 34 kids fumble out of the bus, and they know that every day, public school for the first time is going to think, oh gosh, maybe the school bus isn't going to arrive, or maybe there's only going to be 32 students on it. We better do something to make our school more attractive so we can keep those other 2 students, or any students that have left, we can get them back. So for the first time, they listen to parents at school board meetings, and they improve the product they deliver so that those students don't need to leave. They don't need to go somewhere else to get a great education. They can stay right there. So it does drive innovation and improvement.
You know, it's weird. I've been listening to some podcasts lately, which is probably dangerous, and because I learned things then. And the whole way we've set up public schools is just really military. It was designed, if you go back and really look at how it was set up to create people that didn't ask questions and sat in their chairs, and somebody told them what they're supposed to learn. It wasn't about innovation and all this kind of stuff. Well, now I think we've learned through some of the really, like the Arts and Academy in Springfield for kids that are, struggle a little bit with regular education. They've come up with creative plans that lets them, out of their seats. They're learning. They're not stuck in a situation for 8 hours or 6 hours, whatever it is. And I think that with what you're talking about, school choice, you could get some super creative. I mean, there are already charter schools out there that are really creative, and you could do some things with education, because I think the days of coming to a classroom, sitting at a desk, teacher spouts out some numbers, you spout them back. Obviously, it's not working because our test scores suck. So we need to be doing something that's and our kids are dropping out of school. We need to do something, and what we're doing now isn't working. So the definition of insanity is to expect something different when we do the same thing over and over again. And our education system is done, and people need to be open to changing something.
Well, that brings up 2 good points. One is that the point of our school boards, which was what we were going to talk about also in this, is that they're supposed to be the close connection to parents, and they oversee the education of their district. They hire the superintendent. They can choose the school days and hours and the textbooks to perform for education. But they're supposed to be listening to what the parents want and need for their children. So they should all be community-based, and they should reflect the variety of the students in those communities. But if we have a situation, and I ran for school board a few years ago, and it was supposed to be nonpartisan, and it sure didn't feel like it.
Right.
And so if you have a situation where the teachers union is funding candidates who get put on the school board, and then they just rubber stamp anything that's the superintendent is told by the union or the governor to do, well, that's not representing the students. That's not representing the community. So what school choice also allows is that innovation, because you can have all these different varieties of schools, and the private schools, for example, they can hire that guy that's retiring from Oregon State University as a professor in robotics, and he can come to their private school 1 day a week and teach kids. And I mean, you could imagine how many kids would light up if they got to have somebody that's really knowledgeable and teach them about robotics. So they aren't hamstrung by who can be a teacher and what they can teach. So private schools have personalities. They can be all about the arts, because some kids really learn through the arts. They can be all about physical and sport and learning through more active involvement. And so the private schools, the micro schools, even charter schools can really develop a personality that's unique and their environment. And then a parent can say, hey, that's the right environment for my child. My child can do really well over there, or my other child, maybe, like, I'm absolutely not artsy, but my daughter is really artsy. So if we were put in the same environment and it was a non-artsy environment, I would fail. She'd excel. Well, that's not right for me. So they need to pluck me out and put me over somewhere where it's all about math or analyzing things. That's where I would thrive. And so the whole point of school choice is kids are different. They learn differently. Let's use all these different environments. Let's let those kids find the environment, and then the light will go on for them. The fire of innovation and excitement and learning. And then all of a sudden they're going to be learning stuff and they're not even going to be thinking that they're in school because it's going to be fun and exciting. So I don't know. I can't understand why people wouldn't want this for their kids.
So the real power is being on the school board. If you want to change the schools, I mean, obviously, I love your bill. I love what you guys are doing or what you're talking about. But for people out there, I think they don't realize that the power that being on the school board, if you want to change education, you have to become involved with the school board. And that could be running like you guys did. And in a place like Eugene, good luck. But you still have people, Jim Torrey was there for a while. You do have people on there, but we need more people with different kinds of values. You don't want everybody in there who's a left or a right. You need different kinds of value. I think they should have, that's how they should, it almost should be appointed, but then of course we'd have somebody who appointed all people that they liked with there. But that's what's happening right now is everybody that's getting elected wants to protect the schools. I remember when I did a show one time, I won't mention names because these people are still around, but I remember they fired a superintendent in Springfield, and I think it was 5 school board members, 4 had either wives or direct relatives who were teachers in the district. And so I had them on this water cooler show and I said, do you think it's right that you're a school board member and you're bargaining your wife's salary and her her PERS and all that, and you're bargaining it? And they said, and I said, that's a conflict of interest. And they said, well, no, it's legal. And it is. I checked it out because the OEA lobbied and got it changed because they said not enough people who are just regular people want to be on the school board. So we need to open it up so we can get more people. So you had 4 of the 5 board members bargaining their relatives' contracts for them. Yeah, people, I'm in the business of journalism, which is ethically driven. That is so frickin' unethical that, I would love to have my wife, working on the management at KEZI, bargaining my battles when I was back on the news, that's a hell of a thing. And then you go, and why is PERS so out of whack? And why are so much of this stuff a problem? When you ran for school board, did you feel like that? Was that weird for you?
Well, I just ran on common sense, or what I thought was common sense. Get rid of the DEI and the CRT, get rid of politics, just get back to the basics. Yeah. When I was in school 100 years ago, we focused on reading, writing, and arithmetic, and spelling tests, and multiplication tables, and all we knew was our teachers' names. We didn't know anything about them. We didn't know where they lived, what they did on the weekend, any of that kind of stuff.
Do you remember when you had shop? You had shop, I bet, and home ec.
Yes.
And yet you weren't, but they didn't spend time with you socializing, telling you what you're supposed to believe about people's color of skin or who's what race they are, or whether they believe in the pandemic or whether their parents are Democrats and all this bullshit that they teach. And instead, we actually had shop class, wood shop, all that stuff. And there are schools, I went to Skamania County, Washington, and they still have auto shop, they still have wood shop, and they're teaching trades in their schools. But guess what?
That's great.
They don't focus on all the DEI bullshit.
Well, and that's again why the school board should be a reflection of the community, and that community can then have a personality. It can be a trade-based community, or it can be an art-based community. The school board should be able to represent the families in that environment. And neighborhoods are different, and yet if all we do is we have politics that infect the election of school board members, and then the money from unions and whatever, then all they're going to be doing is rubber stamping what's coming from on high instead of being the protector and the check on what's coming from on high. So if all they do is basically let the state administrator, which is the governor, set policies and standards and force that all the way down, and then the school board doesn't do anything except say, okay, then parents are completely emasculated. They have no say. And if their child is forced to be in a public school where the parents have no say in the education and they don't have the money to get out of that environment, to move to a different neighborhood or to go to private school, that child is stuck. And we will pay for that later when that child comes out without a good education, maybe through crime, drugs, homelessness, or just a very dissatisfied citizen. And that's not right. We need to get Oregon back to where it was a real premier state with all these wonderful resources and great schools.
Just think what you could do with school choice for just I mean, all kids, but for the impoverished and the kids that are on the bottom end of the you may never make it scale. I
Right.
mean, you're giving them a $20,000 check to change their life by allowing them to choose an industrial education program, a more military type program, a program that focuses on culinary, animal sciences, stuff like that. I mean, if
Or it
you,
just gives them something that lights
to
that
get
fire in
excited
them,
about,
keeps them in school.
that gives
Because
me
if they're,
goosebumps. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
I
It gives
just,
me goosebumps because you think, my God, that would be like my son, my second son. My first son did fine in school. My second one was not a very good student because he doesn't learn the way that education teaches you. So now he's a very successful hunting and fishing guide. If he could have taken classes and he knows science, he goes, oh yeah, look, he's talking about this the other day out of a magazine because it has to do with fish and water and how it works. So it's in his wheelhouse and he's super excited about it. And I'm like, but they made him feel so dumb. And the school system did nothing to help him, and now in life, he's learned science and math and all these things on his own because it's stuff that he's interested in. If we had school choice and people could really send their kids where they wanted them to, and I'm pushing the impoverished because Eugene is so always, and Oregon is so, oh, we need to take care. You're not taking care of those people. You're leaving them. They're getting lost in the system. They're dropping out, and you're doing nothing. And you're spending all you care about is their $20,000 you're getting for the education for them, and you're not educating them. That is criminal. That is wrong, and that needs to stop in Oregon.
well, yeah, and when you think about it, the rich families, their kids are long gone. They got pulled out of those schools years ago because the parents had the money.
Look at Marist. I mean, all the kids that go to Marist and parents, they're putting them anywhere.
Yeah,
I remember the school board, the same school board I was talking about. There was this parent. He took 3 of their kids, and they were in private school. And I was like, you can't. How can you do that? Like, I mean, I think I would homeschool my kids or something, but it's like at the time I thought, you are a public school board member and you're sending your kid. That tells me everything I need to know. Everything.
Well, and there are a lot of legislators that send their kids to private school. And yet when you go talk to them and say, can you help us get school choice here? Nope, door slammed, phone hung up, whatever. So they know inherently that choice is good and that students are different and learn differently and need different environments. But yet they're not willing to allow that for all the kids, especially those kids who've got maybe nothing else going for them.
Yep.
And maybe one of those kids, if they got into class that had robots or motorcycles or fishing or arts and crafts or cooking or something, and that was the thing that set them up to mysteriously learn about math because they were cooking and they didn't realize they were learning quarts and gallons and whatever. Or they were learning about electrical circuits because they were doing something with robots. And so all of a sudden their interest is front and center and it allows them to learn. Whereas right now they're being force-fed learning in a certain manner that works for some, but it doesn't work for all the kids. We've got to reach out and help those kids that are not being served well in public schools.
Donna, what you need to do is stop calling it school choice. This is now a school scholarship for every child in Oregon. They get a $20,000 scholarship to spend on the school of their choice every year. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that's what the tax credit scholarship, it uses the word scholarship. And it's a wonderful thing. Again, it's coming from the feds, which I'm never a big fan of, but it's a hands-off. It still protects the autonomy of private schools and homeschoolers, and it makes the money available for public school students who need tutoring or after-school help, which if our schools were doing a bang-up job, they wouldn't need to have tutors or after school. They would be able to go do sports after school or go play. But so the word scholarship, the word letting you use the money that is meant for your child. I mean, it's a pretty simple concept, and it's not 20,000. We're not having all the money follow the child, but it's a portion of that. And that's why, because we don't take the full 20, that's why it actually helps increase funding for those kids who remain in public school. But even putting the money all aside and forget all about money, the point is that we should be making sure that we do everything possible to give kids a good education. And if that means they need to leave this building and go to that building, or go to this home, or go down to the end of the street, that's fine. That's wherever they can find the environment that lights them up and allows them to learn. We should do everything in our power as parents and legislators and citizens to make that happen.
How do people get more information about you and your organization and get involved? There's a lot of frustrated comments on here. Educationfreedom.com, is that what your website?
Well, no, we're Education Freedom for Oregon.com. And we also have the slogan or whatever, let them learn Oregon. That's us also. And we are just about to launch a new entity, a nonprofit where someone can donate and get a tax deduction. And we'll use that, and it's called School Choice Oregon. I don't want to get too confusing, but we're in this for the fight. We're in this for the long haul, to do whatever we can do, whether it's through a legislative, a citizen, a national, to bring these opportunities to students. So School Choice Oregon is what's coming out, but right now people can reach me at letthemlearnoregon.com or educationfreedomfororegon.com.
So last thing for you, why do you, I mean, it's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
A lot of pain and a lot of rejection. And so why did you start?
Well, I retired as an attorney. I was a CPA and tax attorney and blah, blah, blah. And that was all fun. But I wanted to give back now that I'm retired. And it's kind of funny. Once you retire, you really start working. So now I'm working much more than I did as an attorney. But I loved school. I did well in school. I loved reading. I wrote some books. I taught some classes for students and stuff. So I just love that world. But I'm not a teacher, and I don't know all that goes with that. But it just seems like such common sense that we owe it to our children to give them the best education possible, to set them up for a successful life, whatever that's going to look like. So when I started to dig around and find out that our schools are just not cutting it anymore, they were, I think they were great when I was there 100 years ago, but they're not now. And so I thought, well, what can I do? I ran for the school board, didn't make it. So I thought, okay, well, I'll do this. I'll bring school choice here. And I'm doing that. I will continue to do that. We have wonderful, almost 1,300 volunteers have helped.
Wow.
We've now kind of receded because we didn't make it on the ballot. Now we're kind of readjusting. But when we get launched up again, we're going to keep fighting, whatever that looks like, to bring school choice here, because our kids deserve it.
Yeah.
So it's for the kids. I know that's what politicians say, and I'm not a politician by any stretch, but I just want the kids to get a good education. It's pretty simple.
Well, more power to you. I think you're doing. If something new comes up, you contact me, because people want to know. It's good.
I will. Thank you.
And,
thanks for having me.
Yeah. Honestly, I just feel like Oregon is about to burst in a good way. Like,
it's very ripe for a change, because we can't keep doing what we've done. Our kids are suffering. The status quo is not working. Let's try something new that's proven successful in all these other states.
Yeah. Donna, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Well, thank you.
Right. See you later. So you guys, here's the thing. If you look back at history in Oregon, we're always the first, right? We were the first with the bottle bill. We were the first, I think, vote by mail, which maybe is not such a great thing. We were the first to open our beaches so that property owners couldn't put fences down to the ocean. And we really pride ourselves on that innovative spirit. But now we've become the first at being the last. And we've become the first at, not electing someone other than a Democrat in the governor's seat for 40 some years. We've become the first at things that are not admirable and quality. I'm thinking of things, and I know if I say them, I'll get in so much trouble, so I won't say them. But here's my thought. You are about to change. And there's days sometimes, I love Montana, and my wife and I know we were supposed to move, and because I can cause way more trouble out here than I can there, but I cause it there. But I sometimes wake up and I go, oh my gosh, God, you're going to change Oregon, and I'm going to not be there. And I feel like Moses, like I didn't get to go into the promised land, but it's coming. I mean, I love my home state. I will probably never live there again, but I've got a grandkid coming in 2 weeks. So my first one. So you never know what's going to happen. But you know what? I will fight for you forever. And I want to call out the bullshit, and you have to too. So what are the little simple things you can do? You go out and you talk about this interview you just saw with Donna. Did you know there's a school choice thing and they've been talking about it and it's education freedom, for Oregon.com and blah, 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 blah. And you start talking about it. And then when somebody says, oh, I think the schools are fine. Well, then you ask questions because you educate yourself and you say, well, then why are we spending $20,000 a student and we're in the bottom 40 to 50, depending on what survey you have, asking questions. So you're sitting at a cocktail party and who cares if you lose friends? Because you know what? We already saw what it's like to suck up to dumb people during COVID when we all, put on our masks and did really stupid ass things and then left our kids locked up out of the school for 2 years, which we knew was wrong, but we trusted Kate Brown and the Democrats to do this. We know better. So when you know better, educate yourself, and then you go out there and you say something. Just say something. You have a voice. God gave everyone a voice. He intended for you to use it. But if you close your mouth because you want to have friends and you want to get along, you are part of the problem. Oregon needs you to open your mouth and not be a lily fish, not be some spineless creature that just goes along to get along. Because guess what? When you go along to get along, you get kids that aren't getting educated. You get kids that are suffering. And we have all this bullshit of people talking about, we need to help the homeless. Then help the homeless and quit talking about it and throwing money at it. And maybe, that's a whole nother issue. But you have to take your place. You can't expect other people to do it. And don't sit here and tell me if we don't change vote by mail, it's never going to change. Because you know what? That is the most negative attitude. Yes, vote by mail needs to change. But you know what? It's not going to change for a while because it's really popular. So you got to go and do what you can do. What can we do? We can stop the redistricting of our state to make it look like what it's not. And because Oregon is not a blue state, it's actually very purple and tinging to the red. We can do things like that. We can also go in and make sure that we are voting. Those of you who don't vote, shut your mouth. I don't want to talk to you. You don't have anything to bitch about. If you don't vote, you don't bitch. You can't say a word about anything because you're not even participating in the process. And you are graced by God to live in a country where your vote is supposed to count. And if you don't even have the guts, they deliver it to your damn door and you won't even vote, come on. So if you truly want to take Oregon back, then take her back. Get her. You know what's wrong and start demanding things. Look at Donna. She was an attorney. She wasn't she didn't know anything about starting an education, choice thing. She just jumped in. So quit making excuses and jump in. And if you're sticking up for the status quo, I don't even want to talk to you. Because that you're just ignorant, not stupid, ignorant. Ignorant is when you're uneducated, and you need to start listening to other sources for information. There, I've given you the 5 Rick Dancer methods to change your world, and you know what? God will bless you for it. Yeah. You know what I think? What do I got? Like 2 minutes. I got to do this fast. I think the reason that our freedom and using our voice is so important is because God spent a lot of time creating us. And he didn't create a bunch of wusses. He created strong people to stand up for what they have and to bless other people. And you don't bless anybody by sitting on your hands, keeping your mouth shut to get along. You get 80 years, maybe 90, some 60, if you're lucky. Do you really want to live them like a jellyfish? Nah. Yeah, when you stick your neck out there, I know. I lost lots of business, but I'm still here. That's the way you do it. All right, you guys. Well, there, you got my pastor message for the night. But you know what? You're going to change Oregon. I know it. I'm excited. I'm going to watch it, and then I'm going to sit down and have a little cry and go, God, how come you told me to leave? Everybody got in there and they changed it and everything. And he's going to go, I got something new for you. You ready? Go. All right. See you guys later. Share this with your friends because a lot of people, this is how you educate people. This is what you do. All right. Bye, you guys. I'll see you next week. Next week on Tuesday, 4:00 your time, Ben Idle. He's putting out he's been behind the ballot measure to try to get rid of the vote by mail. We're going to talk to him about that. And that's on Tuesday next week. All right. Yeah, we're going to challenge you. See ya. Have a good weekend.